She told me I was going to be a father, and I believed her. For 9 months, I lived in a dream. Or maybe a nightmare I didn't want to wake up from. This is a story about lies. Not just hers, but mine too. Because sometimes we believe the lie because it's safer than the truth. Before I continue with this confession, let me know you're here. That I'm not just telling this to the void. Your subscription and hitting that bell is a sign that you're ready to hear this to the end, no matter how dark it gets. And in the comments, let me know if you've ever had to lie to yourself. Sometimes, knowing you're not alone is the only way to start telling the truth. And now, let me tell you everything from the very beginning. Her name was Sarah. If I had to describe her in one word, I'd choose whirlwind. She'd burst into a room, and the air would seem to crackle with static electricity. Her brown eyes looked right through you, as if she could see everything, your scars, your fears, your most secret desires. She was charismatic, unpredictable, and magnetic. She was everything I wasn't. We met at an industry conference in a hotel with faceless corridors and the smell of coffee. I was there to escape the silence of my new apartment. A year earlier, I had gotten divorced. We grew apart, is what we told our friends. The truth was more bitter. My ex-wife Lena had left, leaving behind an emptiness I was desperately trying to fill with work, the gym, and rare meetings with my sister. I was emotionally vulnerable, like a house with its windows smashed out, open to all the elements. Sarah was one of the speakers. She spoke about marketing strategies, but I barely heard the words. I watched the way she gestured, the way the corner of her mouth curled into a smile, the way her eyes danced with excitement. After her presentation, without knowing why, I approached her. I mumbled something generic about her talk. She looked at me, tilted her head, and said, "You have such sad eyes." "Who hurt you so badly?" It was a punch to the gut. No small talk. She just reached in and cracked my chest open. That evening, we talked for 5 hours in the half-empty hotel bar. I told her everything about my failed marriage, the loneliness, the feeling that my life had taken a wrong turn. She listened like no one had ever listened before, without interrupting, without judging. She just absorbed my pain, and it felt like, by giving it to her, I was becoming lighter. The romance was a flash fire. Within a week, we were inseparable. Within a month, she had moved her things into my place. My bachelor pad, decorated in shades of gray and beige, was instantly transformed. Bright pillows appeared, scented candles smelling of sandalwood and vanilla, her laughter echoing off the walls. She filled every space, pushing out the silence and the ghosts of my past. My friends said I was shining again, and I believed them. I was happy. Intoxicated. I stubbornly ignored the first red flags. They were quiet, almost unnoticeable against the deafening sound of my happiness. One day, I was 20 minutes late from work, stuck in traffic. She met me not with a smile, but with tear-filled eyes. "I thought something happened to you. I called you 100 times. Do you have any idea what I went through here?" Her panic seemed excessive, but I chalked it up to deep affection. I felt guilty and needed at the same time. Then she started using tears as her main weapon in any argument. Put a cup down wrong? Tears. Suggested meeting my friends without her? A hysterical fit about how I didn't value her. She cried so convincingly, so bitterly, that I would immediately give in, feeling like a soulless monster. Gradually, she began to cut me off from the outside world. My best friend Igor was, in her opinion, too crude and unrefined. My sister Kate, according to her, gave off negative energy and was jealous of our happiness. After one particularly nasty scene where Sarah accused Kate of looking at her the wrong way, I started seeing my sister less. It was easier to avoid a conflict than to listen to hours of sobbing and accusations. I told myself it was just intense feelings. But she loved me so much she was afraid of losing me. I was so starved for love and attention that I mistook control for care and manipulation for passion. I was blind because I desperately wanted to be blind. It happened on a Tuesday evening, about 3 months after we met. I came home exhausted, dreaming only of a hot shower and silence. Sarah met me in the hallway. She was pale, her face frozen in a strange expression, a mix of fear and something else I couldn't decipher. In her hand, she held a small white plastic stick. "What is it?" I asked stupidly, though I already knew. Andre. She whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm pregnant." She handed me the test. 2 bright, undeniable pink lines. The world stood still for a moment. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. I was going to be a father. The thought exploded in my mind like a firework. Shock, confusion, and then a wave of pure, unfiltered joy. After all the loss, after the divorce, after the emptiness, here it was. A new life, our child. A chance to start over, to do everything right. I looked up at her, ready to hug her, to spin her on the room, but she suddenly burst into tears. Not tears of joy. Tears of terror. "I'm so scared," she sobbed, burying her face in my chest. "We've known each other for such a short time. What if I'm a bad mother? What if you leave me?" And in that moment, the role of savior and protector became my second skin. I stroked her hair, comforted her, told her we would handle everything, that I would never leave her, that this was the best thing that could have happened to us. Her fear made my happiness even sharper. I wasn't just a future father. I was her support, her rock. I was needed. From that day on, I began to change. I quit smoking that same evening. I almost stopped drinking, allowing myself a glass of wine, only on weekends. I started taking on more side work to save money. The thought of the baby became my main motivator. I spent hours online reading articles about fetal development, partner-assisted births, and proper nutrition for pregnant women. I turned a small storage closet in our apartment into a future nursery, stripping the old wallpaper myself and starting to plaster the walls. I was living in the future. The problem started when I brought up doctors. "We need to get you registered," I said one night at dinner. "Choose a good clinic, get the first ultrasound." Sarah tensed up. "I don't trust doctors," she replied quietly. "They over-medicate, prescribe a bunch of chemicals. A friend of mine had a terrible experience. I want everything to be as natural as possible." "But darling, it's a standard procedure. Just to monitor. To make sure everything is okay. Everything is okay with me." Her voice grew sharp. "I can feel my baby. I don't need strangers poking me with their cold instruments." Every attempt I made to book her an appointment was met with a wall. One day, she felt sick. Another day, she had a sudden panic attack at the thought of hospital walls. Another time, she threw a tantrum, accusing me of not trusting her and thinking she was sick. Each time, it ended with her tears and my guilt. I was the monster, stressing out a pregnant woman. I backed down. "Let's wait until the 12th week," she'd say. When the 12th week passed, she said, "Let's do it after the first trimester when the risks are lower." Time went on and we never set foot in a single clinic. I told myself she was just very anxious, that her hormones were raging. I had to be patient. I had to support her. I believed her. Because the alternative was too terrifying to even consider. The pregnancy became her ultimate trump card. The invisible child turned into a universal lever of pressure, which she used with masterful precision. Any conflict, any attempt on my part to defend my boundaries, now had the same ending. Asterisk. "You can't go out with your friends now and leave me alone," she'd say, placing a hand on her stomach. "The baby and I need your attention." You wouldn't leave me now, would you, while I'm pregnant? That phrase became her mantra, her shield, and her sword. The emotional blackmail reached its peak. The slightest disagreement, my most minor objection, would trigger an episode. She would clutch her stomach, her breathing would become shallow, and her eyes would fill with what seemed to be genuine terror. "You're going to make me have a miscarriage," she would scream. "You don't understand. The stress you're causing, if something happens, it will be on your conscience." And I would freeze, paralyzed by fear. The guilt was sticky, like a spiderweb. I was ready to do anything to avoid being the cause of a tragedy. I apologized even when I was right. I gave in even when it went against my principles. I was slowly losing myself. The final break with my sister happened during the 5th month of the pregnancy. Kate called, worried by my long silence. She insisted on meeting. Mustering all my courage, I invited her for dinner. The evening was tense. Kate tried to ask questions about Sarah's well-being, about future plans, but with poorly concealed skepticism. Sarah gave one-word answers, and after Kate left, she threw a massive tantrum. "I told you she gives off negative energy," she sobbed. She was looking at my belly with hatred. "She wishes us ill." I could feel the baby tense up from her energy. "I don't want to see her in this house anymore. Ever." I tried to argue, to say she was exaggerating, but it was useless. The hysterics lasted for hours, ending with threats that she would pack her bags and leave to save the baby from my cruel family. I surrendered. I called Kate and told her it was best if we didn't see each other for a while. Her voice was filled with pain and disappointment. "Andre, open your eyes," she said before hanging up. I didn't want to open them. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I really was too cold, too callous. Maybe I didn't know how to be supportive and caring. Her words were like acid, eating away at my self-esteem. I began to walk on eggshells in my own home, afraid to say the wrong word to make the wrong. Moved out one evening, when I brought up the ultrasound again, she suddenly beamed. "I already had it done. Surprise," she said, handing me a picture printed on a standard sheet of paper. The image was of terrible quality. A blurry gray smudge on a black background. No clinic information, no doctor's name. Just a picture. "Why is it so blurry?" I asked, trying to make out anything at all. "Oh, they had such an old machine," she answered cheerfully. "And I have a retroverted uterus. The doctor said that's why it's hard to see. But the important thing is, he said everything is fine." "Do you hear me? Everything is fine." I stared at that smudge, and something scratched at the inside of me. A faint voice of reason was trying to break through the fog of my hope, but I wanted it to be true so badly. I pressed the paper to my chest and forced myself to smile. That night, I started keeping a journal. I don't know why. Maybe it was a self-preservation instinct. I needed a place where I could record reality, where facts couldn't be twisted by tears and accusations. I wrote down our conversations, her excuses, my doubts. I wrote to keep from going insane. That journal became my only anchor in the raging sea of her lies. Time flowed strangely. The days blurred into a gray, viscous mass of work, her whims, and my panicked anticipation. The 7th month, the 8th. The due date was approaching, and my anxiety grew with each passing day. The main problem was obvious. Sarah had no belly. At all. It was completely flat. When I gently pointed this out, she immediately had an explanation, backed by articles from Pfaffenwalls. The Internet. "I have a rare condition. It's called a cryptic pregnancy or small bump syndrome," she would declare confidently, showing me her phone screen. "It's when the uterus grows backwards toward the spine instead of forward. It happens, especially with athletic women who have strong abs." I read those articles. Such conditions did exist, though they were extremely rare. And once again, I chose to believe. It was easier than admitting the monstrous truth that loomed somewhere on the periphery of my consciousness. I was at my breaking point. I barely slept, torn between work chores and her constantly shifting moods. I lost weight, dark circles formed under my eyes. I felt drained, empty, numb. The nursery stood ready, with its crib and changing table, like a silent monument to my self-deception. 2 weeks before the due date, I couldn't take it anymore. My nerves snapped. I sat down across from her, looked her straight in the eye, and asked, "Sarah, tell me the truth. Are you really pregnant?" Her face twisted. For a split second, I thought I saw cold fury in it, but it was just a moment. Then her mask was back in place. Her eyes filled with tears, her lips began to tremble. She burst into tears like never before. These weren't just tears. It was the universal cry of betrayed innocence. "How could you?" she choked out. "After everything we've been through? Right before the birth? You don't love me. You never loved me. You're a monster." She sobbed so uncontrollably, so desperately, that I felt like the lowest scum on earth. Guilt washed over me, drowning the last remnants of common sense. I backed off. I held her, apologized, swore that I was just tired and nervous. I was comforting her, but really, I was comforting myself. I chose the lie again, and then, one night on the exact supposed due date, it began. I woke up to a piercing scream. Sarah was sitting up in bed, her face contorted in a mask of pain. "It's starting," she gasped. "The contractions. Andre, it hurts." Chaos erupted. Panic. She screamed, clutching her stomach, her breathing shallow and rapid, just like in the movies we'd watched about childbirth. "Call an ambulance." I yelled, grabbing my phone. "No," she screamed back. "No hospitals. I told you, I want to give birth at home, with a midwife." "What midwife? We never arranged for one. I can do it myself." "I know how. Just be here with me." "Ah!" She screamed and thrashed on the bed. It looked like a performance. Too theatrical, too staged. But at that moment, at 3 a.m, deafened by her cries and my own fear, I couldn't analyze. I was in the eye of the hurricane she had created. She insisted on a home birth, but her plan, whatever it was, failed. After an hour of gut-wrenching screams and thrashing around the bedroom, she suddenly went quiet. Her eyes rolled back and she went limp in my arms. She had passed out. In that moment, my instinct overrode her prohibitions. Panic gave way to an icy terror. I was no longer playing her game. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My voice trembled as I yelled our address into the phone, repeating, "My wife is in labor. She's unconscious." The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. 2 paramedics, a man and a woman, quickly and professionally carried her out on a stretcher. I jumped in after them. The entire way to the hospital, she remained unconscious, and I prayed to every god I knew for her and the baby to be okay. The emergency room was a flurry of activity. We were immediately sent to the maternity ward. A nurse asked me questions. "How far along? First baby? Any complications?" I answered automatically, my brain on autopilot. Sarah was taken to an examination room. I was asked to wait in the hallway. I will remember that hallway for the rest of my life. Sterile white walls, the sharp smell of bleach, the hum of fluorescent lights. I paced back and forth, 10 minutes passed. 20. A nurse came out of the examination room with a puzzled look on her face. Behind her, a doctor, an older woman with a stern gaze. "Andre?" she called. I nodded. "Please, come into my office." Something in her tone made my heart sink. In her office, she gestured for me to sit. "Your wife has regained consciousness," she began calmly. "But we have some questions. We've performed an examination, taken blood for analysis." She paused, looking at me intently. "Tell me, are you certain your wife was pregnant?" The question sounded like a gunshot in the dead of night. "What?" "Of course I'm certain. She's 9 months along. The baby is due today." "You see," the doctor continued in the same even tone, "there are no clinical signs of pregnancy. Her uterus is not enlarged. Her cervix is closed. The level of HCG in her blood, the pregnancy hormone, is practically zero. Physically, there is no reason to believe she has been pregnant in recent months. Or ever." I stared at her, not comprehending the words. They were English, but their meaning wasn't reaching me. This was a mistake. This was insane. "But we have an ultrasound picture," I stammered, remembering that blurry image. The doctor shook her head sympathetically. "Andre... Your wife is not pregnant, and she hasn't been." At that moment, the office door flew open and Sarah burst in. Her face was twisted with rage. The mask was gone. I wasn't looking at a frightened victim, but a cornered predator. "What did you tell him?" she screamed at the doctor. Then she turned to me, and there wasn't a single tear in her eyes, only pure, concentrated hatred. "You. It was all you. You brought me here to humiliate me, so everyone would find out. I hate you." She lunged at me, trying to scratch my face, to beat my chest with her fists. Orderlies ran in. A nurse gave her some kind of injection. Her screams turned into incoherent mumbling, and soon she went limp. They took her away, and I just sat there on the chair in the doctor's office. I stared at the white wall in front of me. There was just an absolute ringing void in my head. My entire world, my entire life for the past 9 months, it had all collapsed in a single moment, turning to dust. There was no baby. There was no pregnancy. There was nothing. Sarah was transferred to the psychiatric ward. The diagnosis sounded like a verdict from a strange, alien world. Factitious disorder with predominantly somatic symptoms, complicated by narcissistic personality disorder. In simpler terms, she wasn't just lying. She was living inside that lie, creating a reality for herself where she was the center of a tragic drama, deserving of attention and sympathy. The doctors explained that her breakdown in the hospital wasn't because she was exposed, but because she had lost control of the situation. I returned to our apartment alone. It no longer felt cozy. The bright pillows looked garish and vulgar. The smell of vanilla made me sick. I walked into the nursery. The crib, the changing table, the tiny booties I had bought last week. I looked at it all, and I felt no sadness, no anger, just a cold, dead numbness. I packed my things into 2 bags and went to my sister's place. I couldn't stay in that stage set of a home for another minute. My life was in ruins. The friends I had pushed away now looked at me with a mixture of pity and bewilderment. How could I not have seen it? How could I have been such an idiot? I asked myself that question 1,000 times a day. The police, called by the hospital, didn't press charges. "There's no crime here," a tired detective said with a shrug. "She didn't get any money from you through deceit. She's been declared mentally unfit. She was sick, not a criminal. And what was I? A victim? An accomplice?" I started therapy. My therapist, a calm man named Victor, didn't judge me. He just listened. And during one session, he asked me to reconstruct the entire timeline of events. I remembered my journal. I found it in one of the boxes of my things. Reading it was agonizing. I turned the pages and saw everything with crystal clarity. Here was the entry about her panic attack before the doctor's visit. Here, the one about my sister's negative energy. Here, the blurry ultrasound picture. And the ridiculous explanation. All the red flags were there, on paper. I had seen them. I had written them down. But I had refused to acknowledge them. I reread my own entries, and the puzzle fell into place. Every lie, every manipulation, every tear, it was all part of one grand, meticulously crafted performance. And I wasn't just a spectator. I was the lead supporting actor, so desperate for the role that I was willing to star in any play. No matter how absurd. Sitting in Victor's office, I spent weeks analyzing her actions, her lies, her motives. But the hardest question remained, unanswered. Why? Why did I let this happen? Why did I cling so desperately to this illusion? And then one day, when Victor asked me again what I had wanted so badly, the answer came to me. It had been buried so deep, I was afraid to dig it up. Myself. It was my own secret, my own lie, and my first marriage. I began, my voice cracking. Lena ... had a miscarriage early on. I had never told anyone about it, not even Kate. We had buried that tragedy in silence. It happened after a big fight. I continued, staring into space. I was cold, selfish. I was more focused on my career than on her. When it happened, I couldn't find the right words. I just ... withdrew. And always deep down, I blamed myself. I was convinced it was my fault, that I had been a bad husband, an unworthy father, that I had failed to protect her. And then it all clicked into place. Sarah and her pregnancy weren't just a chance at a new life. It was my chance at redemption. I needed that pregnancy so desperately to prove to myself that I could be different, that I could be caring, supportive, reliable. I wanted to rewrite my past. Her lie fell on the fertile ground of my guilt. I was willing to believe anything, the small bump syndrome, the blurry pictures, the negative energy, because the alternative, admitting that I didn't have this chance for redemption, was unbearable. I wasn't just a victim of her deception. I was a co-conspirator, a willing passenger in a car headed for a cliff. She was lying to me, and I was lying to myself. We were the perfect couple, built on a foundation of lies. She never had a baby. She was never pregnant, and I never had a spine. But I do now. I've told my truth. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. If my story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own illusions or the people you've had in your life, let me know. Your like and subscription aren't just numbers. They're a signal that stories like this need to be told. That telling the truth, even about ourselves, is important. Thank you for listening to the end.